Eye on Gauteng, brought to you by the Gauteng Department of Economic Development.
Ayanda Sawazi and Philani Nyalunga followed Gauteng's first citizen as she delivered the 2013 State of the Province address and engaged with the province's captains of industry. Let's take a look.
Recently, Gauteng Premier Nomvula Mokonyane presented the State of Province address at the Gauteng legislature for 2013. Though realistic, the Premier had great optimism for the future of the province.
There's still a lot that can be done, but progress can actually be measured. It may sound that it is still early, but the signs are there.
The signs of progress, according to the Premier, are in sectors such as business and leisure tourism. The launch of the City Sightseeing Tour moving to Johannesburg is amongst one of the many improvements mentioned that contribute to creating jobs.
Well, the impact of this bus launch, both to the city but to Gauteng at large, is that we will receive more tourists. There will be more of economic spin-offs because, especially in the tourism space, because more and more people will now see the value in visiting this province and see the value in visiting this city, because they will also be given an opportunity to sightsee the city, which they never had before.
Opportunities like this are crucial to the Premier as she highlights growing unemployment. Despite the adverse global economic conditions, unemployment in Gauteng has decreased from 28.2% in the first quarter of 2011 to 23.7% in the fourth quarter of 2012 financial year. Increasing an initiative like this is what the Premier intends to do.
Our Gauteng Enterprise Propeller will intensify its support mechanisms for co-ops and SMMEs to ensure their survival and greater involvement in the economy. We will ensure that the incubation programs continue until sustainable levels are achieved. The success of our efforts to develop youth entrepreneurs is reflected in the extent to which we have supported dynamic young people with entrepreneurial minds. This is illustrated by Apple Nexus, an internet and computing service business started by two young people, Tuto Mushodi and Gilbert Koza, from Thunder Bay Park in City Bay, Mevakam. They opened their first shop in 2006, and with the support of the Gauteng Enterprise Propeller, they acquired additional equipment and skills. Their business has grown exponentially.
From the Gauteng legislator to a private gala dinner, the Premier then turned to the captains of industry to emphasize her goals to grow and invest in employment.
We view you as one of the critical partners that can assist in achieving the desired results in the area of economic growth and development.
Businessmen and women were both more than in agreement and excited to share their knowledge.
The only known way to create jobs on the scale that we need is through the formation of small and medium enterprises.
So yes, profit is important because we can expand and grow as businesses on the back of that. But we can't if we don't have a pool of educated employees as well as a labor, a pool that we can extract from.
With implementations such as these, the Premier looks to make Gauteng an economic example for the rest of the country.
As an economic powerhouse of the South African economy, the performance of the Gauteng economy has a significant effect on the country's economy in terms of leading the economic growth trajectory, creating sustainable employment within the decent work framework, and initiating interventions to bridge the gap between the formal and informal economies. It is in this context that in our presentation to the people of Gauteng yesterday, we placed a very strong emphasis on the significance of forging meaningful partnerships with both the private sector and civil society.
Now, the role of the Gauteng province in steering the economies of both this country and sub-Saharan Africa has been well documented. Joining me now is Mr. Victor Khomo Eswana, Business Development Executive at Pretoria Portal Cement. Now, Victor, thank you very much for joining us. We've had this discussion with you many times in the past, and the reason why we called you in today is to find out from you your analysis of the situation. Is that discussion still there, where we are talking about the Gauteng province as the #1 economic hub of the continent and South Africa?
Well, at the moment, Lionel, you can't dispute Gauteng's economic significance on the continent. You can't even more dispute its significance in the sub-region. By the sub-region, I'm talking about what we might call commonly SADC. There are about 14 or so countries, from Tanzania on the east, DRC, Angola, Namibia, those countries. Gauteng, it's still the hub. But there are other hubs that are emerging, and that I still have to caution. I don't think Gauteng will ever be irrelevant. You still have some of the best business schools if you think about it. You still have some of the best conference centers. The infrastructure is second to none. I mean, this Gautrain thing is a winner. It's a pity that it doesn't go to the areas like the Vaal, where it will really take the efficiency to the other node of the province, because I think Vaal is often underestimated. And if you could manage the traffic congestion on that side by creating options, go into the West Rand, but I'm sure that will happen. If we could do that with the Gautrain, it would be a real bonus. But what I'm saying is you can't challenge, you can't fault the fact that Gauteng has the best infrastructure on the continent. But the question is, are we behaving like a smart hub? In other words, I think now they're saying close to 50% of the citizens of Gauteng the residents of Gauteng have access to the internet. Is it enough to think about it? I think we are still worse than Tunisia, for example, which is leading the continent.
Do you get a sense of complacency from our policymakers where they are very comfortable to sit back, relax, and say, we are the number one economy in sub-Saharan Africa, and everything else will just fall into place? Do you think we need a lot more sense of urgency from our lawmakers in the province?
You know, the complacency is a human frailty. It's one of the worst vices of human society, because if you are ahead of the race, very few people would be worrying who's catching up with me, how much harder can I work to get better. Now, the Gautrain, if you remember, we weren't even having a consensus about whether we needed it. There were people who were saying we don't need this, and we don't really see the value of this. But the question I'm asking is, what makes a smart economy? I mean, the Premier would have had to identify those things. She spoke about the internet I had in the State of the Province address, but the question is, I mean, are we really aware that when you're sitting at an airport in Kenya, you might get better speeds of the internet than you get in Johannesburg sometimes? Are we aware that the cost of broadband in East Africa is dropping much faster, and it has gone below the average that we are paying in Gauteng? Are we aware that Mozambique in the north of the country is developing an international airport that will cash in on the traffic from China, India, and the day we have an alternative, if I'm a Chinese businessman flying from Shanghai to wherever to Ted in the north of Mozambique, and there's an international airport that's being built there, am I going to go via Johannesburg and make my trip 12, 13 hours, or am I going to go straight from China and make it an 8-hour trip? I'm saying complacency is not a Gauteng problem, but I'm sure that when people keep talking about as the economic powerhouse, it's okay, we are the powerhouse at the moment, but are we behaving like the powerhouse in terms of innovation? Is education particularly better? I want to know that. In other words, are the Gauteng schools particularly doing exceptionally well to produce the kind of skills that we need in the economy?
You know, Victor,
and by the way, understand this. I'm a proud resident of Gauteng. I'm a proud South African.
You're ringing the alarm bells that we really need to start.
I want to stay ahead. I don't want to be overtaken by people coming out of blind spots that I wasn't watching while I was
Competition is good, Victor. I'm sure our viewers would agree with us on that. But if you look at the geographical location of the Gauteng province, you just gave us an example of how other countries, other regions are, offering services that may replace Gauteng as, for example, the hub, the gateway to the rest of the continent. Is that a position that we should be able to give up and maybe perhaps concentrate on other strong points that we have as a province instead of wanting to hog the spotlights, as it were?
We can't hog even if we tried. But I have to tell you, we still have the best financial systems. The stock exchange in Johannesburg is never going to be replaced by another stock exchange in Africa in a long time, if ever. So I'm saying Gauteng will always have a significance on the continent. But I think I've said it in the past, maybe to the sub-region. To say we want to be the gateway to the rest of the continent is a bit reaching, because Nigeria is going to overtake South Africa as the largest economy of the continent. There's no way you can dispute that. We better get used to that fact. But it's not about being everything to everyone. It's about knowing that you become you stay relevant, you remain a part of the landscape, and I'm sure Gauteng will remain part of the landscape.
Right, a very interesting one, and a point that I would like to bring up with you, and this is something that you yourself are very interested in as far as your research, ease of doing business. In 2012, we were number 39, well, 41 actually, out of 139 countries. 2013, we are now number 39. We've kicked up 2 positions. How important is it, or the perception of ease of doing business?
Extremely important. In business, Lionel, perception is more important than fact. So even if that rise is not based on fact, and I'm sure it is based on fact, because they survey people, they ask business people, how long did it take you to do this? Or how is freight and logistics? And again, look at Gauteng, how it improved its infrastructure, road infrastructure, let alone the argument about the e-tolling, but the fact that now highways are much more smoother. It means the ease of doing business has improved, as I say, the high-speed rail. And you see, there are cameras, closed-circuit cameras, so crime is coming down in certain areas. We have the lack of hosting the AFCON when Libya couldn't host it. All those things add up to a lot, and I'm proud to see that we are moving up in the world. Because if you're not moving up, you're sinking. And nobody wants to be part of a sinking ship.
But the thorn, and this is where we're going to leave it, Victor, the thorn in the side of Gauteng and South Africa as such is our growth rate. The last time I had a very intense discussion with you, you were telling me our growth rate is just not big enough. We've heard from the finance minister a few days ago when he presented the budget, and he said our growth rate as a country is just not robust enough in order for us to, to achieve that, those employment figures and so on and so forth. Is it still a thorn in our side?
It is going to be a thorn for a long time if we compare to Mozambiques, the Kenyas, the Rwandas, the Ghanas of this world. And I think that is a challenge to policy makers to think of ways to convert good policies, which we have, into projects. And also find the way of persuading business to get involved, because the private sector often underestimates the role that it can play in making this job creation dream a reality. And I'm not going to get into the argument about labor laws. I wouldn't want anything less in our labor laws. I think we need to protect workers. We need to train workers more. So if workers are going on strike for better conditions, let's listen to them, because we are never going to be able to sink back to the days where we have slave labor conditions. And I know that it is difficult to run a business in South Africa when you look at labor, but I tell you, we are better off with labor unions that are strong, that can challenge you, because when you go forward, you have their support. You're going to do a lot better. Maybe the cost structure will be higher, but you'll always have more loyalty, and you'll be able to attract the best labor force if you have better working conditions.